working mom. And she goes, it can be incredibly overwhelming. Oh my gosh, I just need a break.
Wow.
And then we find out she's had a full-time nanny for 5 years.
What?
Who takes the kids to school.
What do you guys do at home?
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Behind the polished photos and carefully managed headlines, Meghan Markle's public image has long looked almost movie perfect, like every frame was picked with exact control. But once the cameras are gone and the spotlight drops, the question gets louder. What was life inside those gates really like? One former nanny claims the reality felt nothing like the glossy story shown to the world. In her telling, working inside the Sussex home felt less like ordinary childcare and more like living inside a carefully staged setup. She says the rules felt unusual, the mood often tense, and even simple family moments seemed planned instead of natural. That contrast is what she says stayed with her most, because the image sold outside looked warm and effortless, while the atmosphere inside felt guarded and tightly managed. If family life was truly that calm and picture-perfect, why did some people inside the home feel like they were always on the outside looking in? That is the question hanging over this account. And according to this former staffer, the story only became more unsettling once she got a closer look at how the household actually ran. She says the warning signs were there before she even entered the property. The job description did not feel like a typical nanny listing. It felt more like a search for someone who could fit a very specific role. Every detail was precise, every requirement oddly personal. Meghan, she was told, wanted someone discreet, adaptable, polished, and not distracting. To the nanny,
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had got through 3 nannies in just 6 weeks. And that's because working for this couple is incredibly difficult.
that sounded like they wanted somebody skilled, but also somebody who would fade quietly into the background. She claims staff chatter made the vibe even stranger. Applicants allegedly whispered that more than experience was being judged. Appearance, lifestyle, social presence, and even personal relationships were said to be quietly weighed. In that kind of environment, the message felt clear. This was not just about caring for children, it was about fitting neatly into a controlled image without pulling focus from it. A nanny with children of her own was viewed as too complicated. Someone in a relationship was seen as carrying too much outside attachment. The role, she says, did not just ask for professionalism, it seemed to demand full devotion. Flexibility meant more than schedule changes. It meant being constantly available, keeping your own life small, and accepting that privacy might disappear the second the household needed something. What should have felt like a family role quickly started sounding more like service inside a private institution. One wrong word, one wrong impression, and everything could end. Even more unusual, she says applicants were told access to the children would happen strictly on Meghan's terms. No clear rhythm, no easy emotional closeness, no relaxed bonding, just order, silence, and precision. The nanny nearly walked away, but one line in the instructions kept bothering her. All activities within the residence are subject to observation. At the time, she did not grasp how literal that warning might be. When she arrived at the property, she expected a normal interview. Instead, she says it felt like an audition under watch. The home was beautiful and spotless.
Once the agency creates a list of potential hires, you meet with that nanny. Then you have to meet with another one of Meghan's assistants. These are 2 separate auditions. Then you sign an NDA, which grants you access to Harry and Meghan. So this is the 3rd interview.
But also eerily still, almost too controlled. She was told to move naturally through a trial day, observe routines, and stay relaxed. Later, she came away believing that every movement was being studied, from the way she walked to the way she spoke, and even the way she smiled. According to her, this was not just about security. It felt like a system for screening personalities. She says people who came across as too confident were judged as difficult, while quieter candidates could be dismissed as lacking presence. The goal, in her view, was not simply to find a capable nanny. It was to find someone who could slip perfectly into Meghan's carefully shaped world without disrupting its tone. By the time the formal interview began, she says the questions sounded less about childcare and more about control. How do you handle being corrected? And how do you respond when people misinterpret your intentions? Were the kind of questions she remembers. To her, they were revealing. This job, she felt, would require emotional obedience as much as skill. By the end of the day, she says she had not met a family in the usual sense. She had stepped into a production, and like any production, one person seemed to hold final approval. From the outside, Harry and Meghan looked united, but inside, she says there were quiet signs of a divide in how they wanted family life to function. Harry, shaped by structure and royal protocol, seemed to prefer traditional order and trained discretion. Meghan, in the nanny's telling, leaned toward a more modern, California-style approach.
Hide Harry and Meghan's identity from the applicant. They just want to make sure you're comfortable working with Meghan because of her reputation.
Polished, relaxed-looking, but still highly controlled. That difference created tension. It was not really about childcare alone. It was about identity. Harry's instincts came from duty. Meghan seemed to come from presentation, privacy, and personal control. She says the disagreements were not loud, but sharp in their own quiet way. Long silences, polite smiles, and tension under the surface. Harry would reportedly refer to warmth and stability, while Meghan emphasised independence and privacy. In the end, the nanny felt Meghan's version of the home won out. The formal style faded, and what remained was a beautiful, curated space that reflected one dominant vision. That was when the nanny says the deeper truth hit her. This was not just a household, it was a brand. Even affection, in her view, seemed to move through invisible approval. Nothing felt fully loose, natural, or spontaneous. Then came the part she says made staff most uneasy. She began noticing gaps in what she expected to see during such an important period in family life. She says she never saw the kinds of routines or preparations she thought might normally appear, and over time that absence made the house feel even more tense. To be clear, not seeing something does not prove anything on its own, and private families often keep personal matters tightly guarded. Still, she says the contrast between the public image and the private atmosphere felt hard to ignore. Staff, according to her, exchanged glances, but avoided direct questions when public images appeared. She later recalled, "I never saw what I was supposed to see." She says some topics were simply treated as off-limits.
I'm a great mum, I'm a great wife, I'm a great friend, I'm also incredibly modest. I mean, what a boaster. Stop boasting about yourself. What's wrong with her? She is racked with epic insecurity, isn't she?
Oh, H, they're already out there. They're already out there, H. So of course I've got to use them to sell my clothes, to sell my wine, to sell my makeup, to sell whatever else comes next, probably children's clothing.
And that silence gave the whole home an even heavier feeling. For a public figure who often spoke about authenticity, the gap between the outside message and the inside mood struck her as deeply unsettling. And for the people living inside that world, one question kept lingering in the background. Were they protecting genuine privacy or protecting a carefully managed perception? As the weeks passed, the house still felt strangely incomplete. Spotless, elegant, and almost too pristine for a place meant to carry the everyday chaos of small children. So the nanny kept looking for the little signs of real life, toys left out, fingerprints on glass, tiny clothes in hampers, and the kind of small mess that makes a home feel truly lived in. What unsettled the nanny most was not what she saw inside the house, but what she did not see at all. No bedtime routine, no crying in the next room, not even a stray pacifier left behind on a table. It felt, in her words, like the idea of children was always being presented, but their everyday presence never seemed to fill the space in a normal, lived-in way. She tried to explain it away at first. Maybe the children stayed in another part of the property for privacy. Maybe the family kept certain routines completely off-limits. But even on days when gatherings were rumoured to be happening, the place stayed strangely quiet, with meals prepared and left untouched, and whole areas of the home feeling frozen in place. The playroom especially stayed on her mind. It often looked less like a room used by young kids, and more like a room waiting for somebody to photograph it. Nothing looked naturally out of place. Nothing looked rushed, messy, or real. And in a house where cameras were always present and staff were careful with every word, the silence started to feel louder than noise. No one wanted to be the first one to ask questions. People kept their heads down, lowered their voices, and acted like they did not notice what felt off. One housekeeper quietly said, "Everything here is managed, even what we're meant to believe." And that line stuck with the nanny long after. Over time, that uneasy feeling got harder for her to shake. The public saw warmth, closeness, and a polished family image. What she says she saw instead was something more distant, more rehearsed, and far more controlled. The more she looked for ordinary signs of family life, the more she felt that something basic and human was missing. Her doubts did not explode all at once. They built slowly, piece by piece, until what began as quiet discomfort turned into a stronger private belief that this house carried the story of family life more than the natural feeling of it. Then the Netflix documentary came out, and for her, it hit completely different. Most people watched it as entertainment or royal drama. She watched it as somebody who believed she knew the inside of that world. The soft montages, the cozy family visuals, the emotional lighting, all of it made her stare harder because she felt the spaces on screen did not match the spaces she remembered. The decor seemed off. The room angles felt wrong. Even the direction of the windows and the way the sunlight hit the furniture looked different to her eye. "That wasn't our house," she reportedly told a former co-worker, adding, "At least not the one we worked in." Scenes showed Meghan cuddling Archie, Harry smiling in a sunlit garden, and tender family moments framed with soft music and warm colours. To viewers at home, it looked intimate and inviting. To the nanny, it looked too clean, too polished, and too carefully lit. It felt less like home footage and more like a glossy lifestyle campaign selling domestic perfection. She even paused on certain shots because the details bothered her so much. One frame showed Meghan on the floor with toys around her in a moment that was meant to feel natural and sweet. But to the nanny, it felt arranged. The layout in the background did not line up with what she had memorized from moving through those rooms day after day. The laughter sounded oddly sharp and perfectly timed, almost like it had been sweetened in post-production. That was the moment the whole thing gave her a chill, because she started asking herself a bigger question. If the series was not showing life as it really felt, then what exactly was it showing? By the time the credits rolled, she says she could not shake one thought. This was not a documentary capturing reality. It felt like a polished version of life built to be accepted without question. And that same feeling followed her back to what it had been like working in the residence, where the atmosphere often felt less like a family home and more like a tightly controlled compound. From the minute staff arrived, the rules kicked in. Phones had to be handed over. Visitors, cleaners, and gardeners reportedly moved through checkpoints before being allowed inside. Devices were locked away in sealed pouches, and conversation was expected to stay strictly work-related. Casual talk, harmless observations, even everyday friendliness could suddenly feel risky. In that kind of place, a simple personal comment could be taken the wrong way fast. The nanny says the house felt monitored from every angle. Cameras covered hallways, entrances, and outdoor walkways. There were even whispers among staff that some rooms had hidden listening devices installed for security, though no one ever seemed comfortable calling it that. To the people working there, it did not feel protective. It felt invasive. It changed the way everybody behaved. Staff stopped opening up. Friendly bonds turned stiff. Even asking, "How are you?" could earn a warning for getting too familiar or stepping outside the approved tone. That was when she began to feel that privacy in that house had stopped being a boundary and turned into an obsession. The line between protection and paranoia looked thinner every day. Even Harry, who once had a reputation for being more relaxed and approachable, seemed different to her in that environment. His laugh, when it did appear, seemed brief and quickly swallowed by the mood of the house. Staff would leave at the end of the day, drained, careful and silent, like they had spent hours inside a place where trust was always in short supply. Then she noticed another pattern, and this one stood out hard. Every time cameras, photographers, or any planned media moment was coming, the whole house changed almost overnight. Rooms that had looked untouched suddenly filled up with flowers, children's books, blankets, and carefully placed toys. Family photos appeared in perfect positions. Chairs looked softened for effect. Corners that had felt cold the day before now looked like somebody had rushed in to create warmth for the lens. To her, it did not look like real family clutter. It looked like a set being dressed before a scene. On one morning, she says Meghan's team prepared for a private family shoot, and the contrast felt especially sharp. The home stayed quiet. No running footsteps, no playful noise, no little interruptions. Nothing that matched the cozy family frame about to be presented. Then, when the photographers arrived, Meghan stepped in, looking calm, polished, and fully camera-ready. Every movement seemed intentional. Every smile landed at the right moment. Every glance downward looked gentle, then turned just enough toward the lens. To the nanny, it no longer felt like candid motherhood. It felt like branding. Later, when those well-known chicken coop photos circulated, showing Meghan and Harry with the children feeding hens, some staff reportedly exchanged awkward looks. The area itself may have seemed familiar, but the moment did not feel familiar to them. In her mind, that was the pattern all over again. These were not random family memories captured in real time. They were scenes assembled to support a public narrative, and that is what stayed with her the most. Each smiling image, each glowing headline, each polished spread seemed designed to tell a story first and reflect reality second. So when she saw praise pouring in about authentic family life, she felt a cold disconnect because, from where she stood, the rough edges had long been cut away. Reality, she believed, had been cropped out to protect the picture. In the end, she does not frame her story as revenge. She frames it as release. After spending so long in a home where image seemed to shape everything, she says speaking up felt like the only way to step back into something honest. Her account may never appear in glossy interviews or soft-focus documentaries, but it lingers because it feels raw, uneasy, and stripped of polish. What she describes is not wild rage, but disappointment, a quiet heartbreak over how authenticity can disappear once everything starts revolving around presentation. For all the glamour, power, and obsession with privacy, she says the most haunting thing in that house was not chaos. It was silence. Maybe that is the biggest twist of all, that some stories are not built to inform people, but to protect the image of the people telling them. And if this part left you wondering what was real and what was carefully arranged for the cameras, then you need to see what came before this one too. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if this story caught your attention, and subscribe for more deep dives into the drama behind the headlines on Star Spotlight.